My name is Jenna Burrell, and I'm an assistant professor at the School of Information at UC Berkeley. I have a new book that's titled Invisible Users, Youth in the Internet Cafés of Urban Ghana, and it's a study of how people experience the internet in the margins of the global economy. The book deals with a particular group of young, non-elite men who used internet cafes in Ghana, and to what purpose they put the technology. The thrill of connecting to the outside world was really apparent in the way that some of these young people found creative ways to engage with the internet. So it was common for young men to form clubs. Sometimes they would call these bases. And one particular group of young men who were friends from school decided that they wanted to form a club, and they went to the internet cafe, and they went to the British Airlines website and signed up for their frequent flyer miles club. And the name of the club is the Executive Club. So they decided to name their own club the Executive Club. And they got these little cards in the mail that said British Airlines Executive Club, and it had their name, and there was this sort of satisfying connection to abroad that they were able to realize through that practice. The other thing that those guys used to do, they would form competitions, so they would go online and try and see who could get the most CDs, just kind of junk, things that, poker games that you could get for free. They'd see who could get as many CDs as possible. They would send away to get free Bibles, just whatever they could kind of get sent to them from overseas would form the basis of a kind of competition. The main kind of thrust of internet use in these internet cafes for young people, for these non-elite young men, was to collect pen pals. And that term covered a whole range of different kinds of relationships. So that could mean like platonic same-sex friends, or it could mean romantic relationships, or it could be someone looking for a spouse, or a business partner, or a patron, or an older person to give them advice. But by and large, they were looking to meet foreigners. So not just Americans, but people in the US or Europe. Often they found pen pals in places you wouldn't necessarily expect, like Pakistan or the Philippines or Malaysia. And what I found is that it was often a struggle to sort of maintain those connections. So to kind of relate across the cultural distances that were apparent once they started talking to these foreigners who were from societies they weren't very familiar with. What I found at one extreme, Ghanaians coped with that by pursuing scamming activities. So there was a subpopulation of internet cafe users who were doing scams of the sort that people are pretty familiar with, so writing emails requesting help to get money to release money from a bank account, or someone posing as a politician who has access to a government contract. And what I found is that in many of those stories that young people were creating, that they used to scam people with, they were drawing on Western stereotypes about Africa. So ideas about Africa as a place that has corrupt politicians, or has a lot of poverty, or has war, or a place that operates by flexible rules. And those were not actually the experiences these young Ghanaians had themselves necessarily, but they knew that Westerners sort of responded to those kinds of stories about Africa as a place of corruption and poverty. And there was this sort of satisfying table turning involved in kind of portraying these stereotypes and then getting people to succumb to them, and stealing money from people based on these basically stereotypes of Africa. The implications of this research, I think, partly relate to the debate we've been having nationally about network neutrality. So in a sort of tangential way, it relates to the network neutrality issue. There are all these kind of security mechanisms that are cropping up and are being used to deal with some of these scamming activities, and I think really overshoot their targets. So certain websites you just can't get access to in Ghana. It's difficult to get access to dating websites because of scamming, but it is the case that Ghanaians who are not trying to scam people are using the internet for shopping, for dating, for other kinds of practices. And I think on the Western side of things, there's a need to rethink the security mechanisms that do things like use IP address information to create a wall between African countries and parts of the internet. That's really problematic, and I think is an over exaggerated response to the scamming activities that need to be handled as their own problem for internet security.